Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick. We're back on the Star Wars Legion page to talk about the Boba Fett expansion, which just got a new article today. And before we dive into this, I just want to point out, we still don't have an article for the Specialist pack for both the Rebellion and the Empire. I'll put them up here on the screen for you to see, because some of you might not have seen these images. These were posted on FFG's Twitter feed during Gen Con, but it's the only thing we've seen of them apart from the announcement in the in-flight conference at Gen Con. I was pretty much expecting like the next week we'd have something on these, but still not much information. And that's really left me scratching my head. I don't know why we haven't seen anything more on these, but hopefully very soon that'll happen and I can talk a bit more about those. But today I'm going to talk about Boba Fett and actually a bit more broadly about Legion in general, because since we last spoke about Boba Fett, a lot of things have come to light, and the conversation around Boba Fett in particular is very interesting. Because first up, he's the first operative to be put in the game, and second of all, people are sort of really concerned about the power level of Boba Fett, and I completely understand. You look at the stats, you look at the cost, it definitely makes a lot of sense. In general, I do think it is worth having the conversation about this with Legion, because the game does seem very fun, very fair and balanced overall. From what I've played so far, I absolutely love it. The only thing that seems to be of slight concern in terms of issues with the game is just general power level and costings. Things like ATRTs and speeder bikes are generally considered to be a little bit cheap compared to how much impact they can have on a board state. And I think because that's the only real issue with the game, or at least the only real issue I think the game has, it is worth having the conversation about doing what they did with X-Wing in Legion, where we control the points through a squad app. And I know a lot of you people are going to like roll your eyes when I say something like that and go, oh no, that's overly complicated. We don't want everyone with Legion being on their phone the whole time. But the great thing about the squad app is you can rebalance things as the game progresses. So long as the core mechanics of any of the units aren't broken, it's a way to address power level as the game goes on. And I don't think it needs to go as far as to having a second edition in Legion. Obviously, the game only came out a few months ago. But if we could just say, okay, from this point on, we're not printing points on cards, and all the points for the cards will be in the app, and all the existing cards and units are subject to change based on that as well. It's not really the kind of game where you physically read the cards and add up the points. It goes up all the way to 800. It's not the kind of thing you usually do. And I don't think that causes too much confusion. In the comment section below, if you agree with me, if you think that's a good idea, if you think it's a terrible idea, let me know. But for the time being, let's talk about Boba Fett. I've waffled on for far too long. So down here we have the stats for the card. Now I've gone through this all before, but I'll quickly do it again. Cost 140 points, has 2 decorated and 2 tech slots. It is a 1 mini operative, jump 2, arsenal 2, bounty, impervious, and sharpshooter. And both bounty and impervious are 2 new mechanics. Bounty, at the start of the game, you put a bounty counter on one of your opponent's commanders or operatives. If you manage to defeat that unit during the game, you get that victory point. If you don't, your opponent retains that victory point, which is quite swingy and interesting. Also, impervious means you roll extra dice based on your opponent's pierce value, which is really good. In fact, Boba Fett has one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in the game, because he defends with red dice, has defensive surge and impervious. He arguably has better defense than Vader, although Vader can deflect and ping bullets back at his opponent. Boba Fett can't do that, but purely based on the fact that Boba Fett doesn't have to spend a dodge token to get that effect, he seems to have a better passive defense than any other unit in the game. Indeed, if we look at the overall point cost, he cost 140 points, which on the face of it does look very pushed. This is the opinion of a lot of people, and I don't disagree. I think it's absolutely a fair case to make. However, I will make this case for Boba Fett, just playing devil's advocate here. Let's bring up on the screen side by side Boba Fett and Chewbacca. And Chewbacca, I feel like, is in very much the same pool for what would appear to be 80 points. I know this picture's a bit hard to look at. Let's not get into that in this video. But for 80 points, he seems to be fantastic. Indeed, he's only 10 points shy of being half the points of Boba Fett, and he already has almost twice the amount of health as Boba Fett. Sure, his surge stats and his movement isn't as good, but his weapon is actually better than both of Boba Fett's ranged weapons. He gets both of those keywords and 4 dice, 2 of which are better than the only 2 dice that Boba Fett use. Now, I'm not saying that Chewbacca is anywhere near as powerful as Boba Fett. I absolutely can see that he's not, but he's also a lot cheaper. And indeed, both of them seem to be relatively cheap when we're talking about commander units. But remember, they're not commander units, they're operatives. And being operatives gives them a bit more of a challenge in terms of list building, because you have to field this relatively quite expensive unit alongside a commander. Remember, every squad must have at least one commander. And because these guys don't count against that, it means that you have to invest a lot of points putting them on the table as well as a separate commander. Which means in the case of Boba Fett, it's going to be more difficult to put things like more bikes and AT-STs and that kind of stuff. Fielding him alongside Vader is going to be tricky, for example. It really starts to eat in the cost of your core units, which you must field 3 of. And then it means your list becomes a bit too top heavy, so I don't think it's as straightforward as people are seeming to say. I think there is an inherent cost in the fact that they are operatives and not commanders. And for that reason, I don't feel like Chewbacca and Boba Fett are too powerful right out of the gate. I mean, time will tell. We'll see what happens when we get them on the table. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on the matter. And since the last time we talked about Boba Fett, we now know what all 3 of these cards on his spread are. We have a copy of Hunter, a copy of Duck and Cover, and a copy of Emergency Stims. Now, I'm not so certain about Emergency Stims, but I like Duck and Cover as an include here. Gives Boba Fett a bit more flexibility. I don't know whether you're going to want to cheese this and always take these suppression tokens, but it gives you the option to move around the battlefield and gives him a decent amount of passive defense, which seems really, really good. I don't think we're going to want to give Boba Fett the kind of aggro builds that we give Chewbacca and the Wookiees, despite the fact that their upgrade bar are almost exactly identical. Also revealed in this article are all 3 of Boba Fett's command cards. We only previously saw one of them. The one pip card we have here is Whipcord Launcher. Boba Fett can perform moves while engaged with a unit that has 1 or more immobilized tokens. During Boba Fett's activation, he gains action. Choose an enemy trooper at range 1 and in line of sight. It gains 2 immobilized tokens and 2 suppression tokens. A nice bit of flexibility. Only commands Boba Fett. His 2-pip card, again, only commands Boba Fett. During Boba Fett's activation, he gains the following weapon, which is a flamethrower. In melee range or at range 1, 1 red dice, blast, spray. A nice bit of ground control against any nearby core units. And we have the Z6 Jetpack Rocket, again, just Boba Fett. And this time he gains this weapon at range 3 to 4, 3 red dice with blast and impact 2. Fun, nasty weapons, but also this exposes another issue with operatives. In general, they don't have a lot of options in terms of commanding troops around them. Indeed, the only thing that we've seen out of any of these operatives that can command any other troops is a Chewbacca card, the 3-pip card, which can also give a command token to Han Solo, which isn't really commanding Han Solo, they're just working together. And Boba Fett's cards can't even command any other troopers. And again, I have to reiterate, this is one of the setbacks with operatives versus commanders. And one of the reasons why I'm not too concerned that they're a bit pushed in points. But in any case, let me know in the comment section, what do you think of this? Do you think he's going to warp the whole format? Do you think every single Imperialist is going to run Boba Fett? FFG are stating in this article that we should have him by the end of Q3, which is by the end of this very month. So hopefully in the next 4 weeks or so, we'll see him hitting the shelves. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, guys. Like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Reddit. And I'll catch you guys later on.